Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, particularly because this is Howard University. I've heard of this university for a very long time, but I've never had the privilege of giving a talk here. So this is a first for me, and I'm delighted. I'm thankful to my hosts for extending this invitation. And I presume this is going to be an occasion for an honest, fruitful, frank exchange of views. And in the spirit of that frank exchange of views, I would like to make one observation at the outset. I was sent a copy of the invite for this meeting. As I scrolled down at the bottom of the invite, there was a disclaimer which said that the organizers do not necessarily share the views of the speaker. I've spent 3.5 decades in universities, 26 years in African universities, 10 years in the American Academy, at times when there were elected governments, when there were dictatorships, when there were civilian governments, when there were military governments, but never before in my life have I been in a university lecture where the organizers announced publicly that the views of the speaker may not represent their views. I have never been in a university where it was assumed that there may be administratively sanctioned truths, and therefore administrative sanctions of others who may not share that notion of truth. I always thought universities were a place for debate, where it was a matter of course that conventions may be challenged, and a university worth its salt takes itself to be a site where conventions can be challenged. I assume that that is indeed the view here. I don't know what kind of politics resulted in that disclaimer, but I thought that it would be unfortunate if I was to begin this talk without at least an observation on it. I went to Sudan to do academic work in 2003. I actually wanted to do a comparative research on Sudan and Nigeria. My first visit was to Sudan. When I was there, the insurgency in Darfur began. And as it happened, my work increasingly focused on the conflict in Darfur. I was struck by the fact that the Darfur conflict became almost a global phenomenon in a year or so after the insurgency had begun. I was struck by it because I was used to a situation where African tragedies happen in the dead of the night, unnoticed. That was the case with Rwanda, that was the case with Angola, that was the case with Congo. But Darfur appeared more than life-size. I asked myself why. As I returned to the US, I usually spend the academic 9 months in New York City at Columbia and the academic summer in Kampala. As I returned to the US, I realized that, of course, what was different about Darfur was that it was the focus of a domestic movement in the United States, the Save Darfur movement. I realized that this movement was the most successful attempt to organize particularly the university and the student community, around a single issue since the anti-war movement during the Vietnam years. I think it's even more successful than the anti-apartheid movement was. Except, I also realized that unlike the anti-war movement of the Vietnam years, the Save Darfur movement is not a peace movement. It has embraced the organizing lessons of the anti-war movement of the 60s. It has wedded them to finely honed skills of advertising media and put this in the service of a call for war, not peace. The slogans of the movement are boots on the ground, out of Iraq, into Darfur. When I went to Darfur in 2006, I asked a UN humanitarian officer, I said, Save Darfur movement raised $14 million this year. How much of that money came to help the people who have no food, no medicine in Darfur? He looked at me. He said, nothing. I said, nothing? He said, yes. When I returned to New York City, I asked a person I know in the Save Darfur movement. I said, this is what I was told. He said, well, we are an advocacy group. We don't send money to Darfur. We spread the message. So I want to talk about that message. I want to talk about the erroneous assumptions that underline that message. I want to talk about why that message has been lethal. Why that message has increasingly become one of the key obstacles to peace in Darfur. The first, I'm heavily jet lagged. As you said, I boarded a plane in Addis yesterday evening for Dubai, and then boarded a plane in Dubai to get to New York City. It was the quickest way to get here and make this talk. As I said, I wasn't going to give up an opportunity to be at Howard University. The first erroneous assumption. How many people have died in Darfur since the insurgency began in 2003 and the counterinsurgency was organized against it? In 2006, an agency of the US government, Government Accountability Office, this is an audit agency. Its job is to keep other agencies honest. The GAO took 6 estimates of the numbers killed in Darfur, high-end and low-end estimates. It got together with the US Academy of Sciences and identified 12 experts. It asked these experts to look at the 6 estimates, to examine the methodology used to arrive at the estimates, and to advise the GAO on the reliability of this methodology.